What's up guys, now today is the day that we give our little FX powered gaming PC a much needed upgrade, but can actually spending around £100 on upgrading the system save it? Well, there's only one way to find out. Now if you've been following our little video series here, you will know that this system is a little FX powered gaming PC that I originally bought for £30 that wasn't working. We fixed it, we did a slight upgrade to see if we could get any kind of more performance out of it, and we tested it and it performed very badly. You were okay if you were playing some of the really old titles, but anything that was more modern than around 2015 actually performed so dire on it that it completely wasn't worth it. So instead we've decided to give it a full upgrade. We're going to be keeping the platform, but we're going to see what kind of changes we can make to it, and we're going to be doing it on a budget of just £100. We are going to be changing quite a few little components in here, and the first thing that we're going to start with is the CPU. The original FX 4300, the little quad core that was kind of classified as the dog of the generation, is going to be swapped out for an FX 6300. Now the reason for this is because you can actually pick these up very cheaply, and it will give us 6 cores and 6 threads over the original quad core, so hopefully gaming performance should be uplifted by quite a bit. But as well, it's also being done on such a tight budget that this is pretty much all I could afford. Could have gone to something like the FX 8350, but they still hold quite a bit of a premium, and that's probably because they're very sought after and a lot of people want them. But changing the CPU is going to be super easy once we've removed the cooler. All we need to do is just lift the little bracket up, remove our FX 4300, which has served its time now and it's going to be better off going somewhere else, and replacing it with our 6300. Now of course on the AM3 platform, which this is, AMD still had pins on their chips. They didn't change them till around AM5, so you've got to be careful of those pins as you're installing. Make sure you get the CPU the right way around, drop it into the slot, put the arm back down, and we are good to go. That is a CPU upgrade, and this motherboard should actually take it quite well because it is technically the same generation as the previous one. Along with the CPU upgrade, we are going to be upgrading the RAM too. At the moment it is currently using a single 8GB of 1600 MHz DDR3. That means that it's not running in dual channel, which is a shame and really does affect our gaming performance, but we are going to be ditching that. And to be honest, changing your RAM in a system like this with this nice little old green stick here, it is from Crucial, so at least it's branded, is actually one of the cheapest things you can do. I managed to get an absolute bargain on RAM. I got these 4 sticks here and they were really cheap, so definitely go for this. This is 4 sticks of 4GB of 1600 MHz, so it will give us a total of 16GB, doubling up on the previous model, but also it will run in dual channel, so we're going to get some extra performance there too. Definitely an upgrade worth making if you have an older system like this. Installing new RAM is really simple. All we need to do is just push back these little pegs here on all of the sticks, because we will need to install all of them, and then just simply lining them up and dropping them down into the slot. You add a little pressure on either side just so they click, and basically just keep going. These are 4 matched sticks, and like I say, they're an absolute bargain, so it's definitely worth doing. And we got some nice little cool heat spreaders on them, so not only do they look better in the system, it's really going to help with RAM cooling, although I don't think we're generally going to get an issue with that, but overall I think that actually looks a lot better. One of the major pitfalls of this system originally was, of course, its old style hard drive there. We've got a mechanical hard drive that was not only running the operating system, but it was also our game storage. It is a 1TB Toshiba drive, but it's really long in the tooth nowadays, particularly for even operating system type stuff, so we are going to be upgrading that. We could technically get away with leaving it in the system and using it as like a game storage drive or a file storage drive, but generally we want our operating systems now running on an SSD, and I managed to pick this one up here. This is a Crucial BX500. It's not the best SSD in the world, and of course we don't have any access to M.2 slots or anything, so we need to go SATA, but they are relatively cheap. It is a 480GB, so it's enough for our operating system, probably as well as a bunch of games as well. But like I say, we can keep the mechanical one around if we want to, just to have the game storage on there, put our operating system and our most commonly played games on the SSD, and we should be good to go. That should actually really bring this system to life, particularly in general performance. For now, I am going to be installing the drive in replacement of the hard drive, so we are going to be putting it on this little bracket here. That will give us the opportunity to just swap it over, and we can just slide it in and screw it in, but it's very easy to get these. These are very simple, cheap devices. I don't believe that the case really has a place for an SSD because they're quite old now. So again, if you have an older case, you probably want to actually install it into something like this and then just reuse one of the old mounts. You would pay just a couple of pounds for one of these really, so it's not going to really add to our budget here, but it's a nice thing to have, particularly if you want to start rack mounting a bunch of them in. Once it's installed into the cage, all we need to do is remove the hard drive from the actual bay. We will need to take the back off of this because it is screwed in from both sides, but it should just slide in and plug and play. Now, when I originally set my budget for this upgrade, I set the budget at around £100. I thought that was completely fair, particularly for somebody that had a system like this. So clearly they are a budget gamer if they're still running on this. And £100 is not completely out of this world, particularly when it comes to newer system prices. So far, we haven't spent that much at all. It's only been around £28. The CPU from CEX will cost you about £6. That's an absolute bargain. The memory is probably one of the best upgrades that you can make in a system like this, and it only costs 50p a stick. That's £2 just for 16 gigabytes of DDR3, which is absolutely amazing. Again, from CEX. And the crucial SSD cost around £20. You probably shouldn't buy them pre-owned, but usually you can get a pretty decent thing if you do that. And I got one there that was actually pretty decent too. So a total cost so far of £28 leaves us around £72 for the rest of the upgrades, and there's only really two more components that we really want to go with. To go along with the CPU, because we have increased the TDP here up to 95 watts, I didn't want to install that old fan on it. The old fan, which is this one here, a stock AMD fan, it could actually be okay for this CPU in terms of performance, but it's really loud and it makes a lot of noise. So I actually purchased myself one of these here. This is a Jonsbo CR1200. They're not the greatest coolers out there, but people have done many reviews on them in the past. They're very, very cheap, and you can pick these up for about £6, which is roughly what I paid for it. So that's an absolute bargain. It's a tiny little tower cooler that actually does support up to a 95 watt CPU. So we're going to be installing that onto this system, and it'll also give us a little bit of RGB flair. Not that it actually matters, because this case doesn't even have a glass panel anyway. So we are going to be installing that. But of course, the final part of the build and the most important thing is the graphics card, and this is where we're going to get probably quite controversial. The graphics card that I managed to pick up for this system is the AMD Radeon RX 6500 XT, and I know what you're thinking, why on earth would you install a graphics card that has a very limited bus of 64-bit, a PCI Gen 4x4 interface onto a system that actually only supports up to PCI Gen 2? Well, actually, it's not going to make that much difference at all. Of course, running the RX 6500 XT in a normal system with this kind of interface will actually degrade its performance by nearly half, but all that means is that we're going to have a limit on the amount of data that can go from the CPU to the graphics card, but we've already got that anyway. The FX 6300 is a very weak CPU today, something that wouldn't even fully utilize an RX 6500 XT anyway, so we shouldn't see that much of a difference. It is completely overpowered for the system, but again, there is a reason for using something like this, and that is because I got it super cheap. This graphics card cost me only £65, which seems completely fair for an RX 6500 XT now, because you will get the latest technologies. They're still completely supported. Yes, true, they only have 4 gigabytes of RAM, but if you were to install something like an RX 500 series, which is a completely valid graphics card to install in here, you would get probably around about the same performance, but again, it's not supported, so it's not very future thinking. And good alternative to this would be something like the NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1650. That again is still a 4 gigabyte card, but it doesn't suffer from the PCI generation issues that the RX 6500 XT would. But when I actually tested both cards side by side in a similar system to this, there was actually single digit differences. And that's because, like I say, the CPUs are just too weak to actually perform for them cards. So if you can actually get one for £65, which I actually did, they could actually make a decent upgrade for a system like this. Although, of course, we're going to test that theory out, and I may be completely proven wrong anyway. But the model that I managed to pick up here is from Gigabyte. It is the Gigabyte Eagle. It's supposed to be an overclocked version, but if I'm completely honest, it's probably one of the worst quality graphics cards that I've ever purchased. It is completely flimsy, and it really feels like Gigabyte built it on a Friday. It's like they were forced into doing it. It has a dual fan configuration, but the fans on it are tiny. They're absolutely small. There is no backplate on this one, which is an absolute shame, because the GTX 1650 that I actually have, that is exactly the same model, a Gigabyte Eagle, does actually come with a backplate. It feels much more polished off. And to be honest, the card completely looks like it's bent anyway, even without being installed in a system. So, of course, that doesn't really matter. What really matters is the performance, and this card does work perfectly fine. So, Did I get a bargain or not? I'm not quite sure, but £65 seemed completely fair, and it was within budget too. That means the total spend on this system, including the graphics card and the new cooler that we're going to be installing, does actually come to under £100. But will this £100 upgrade actually make any more of a difference? Well, let's get the graphics card installed, let's get that fan on, hook it up to the test bench, and see what actually happens. Now with the system built, it's actually starting to look pretty cool. It's starting to look more like a gaming PC. We've got a little bit of RGB in there. We've got a graphics card that actually looks like a gaming graphics card. The old R7 250 that was in the system originally was the weakest point at one point. We actually proved this in another video where we upgraded it to an R9 270. It was kind of a single same generation upgrade, and it made a world of difference. So the RX 6500 XT, being leagues ahead of this, should actually give us the maximum performance we can. In actual fact, I think now the CPU is probably going to be the biggest bottleneck, and there's not really far that we can go. Like I said before, we could install something like an FX 8350, but then we need a bigger cooler. We're just spending more and more money, and to be honest, with a system like this, it's probably just not worth it anymore. But there is a slight issue with the system, and that is because the motherboard BIOS on here is so basic, we can't actually kind of configure any kind of fan curves or anything like that. So the CPU cooler fan is running at top speed, and it's pretty much either on or off. So if you can hear it, I do apologize. But overall, the system is working okay. Things are much more snappier due to that FX 6300. We can open things in Windows, and we are still using Windows 10. Unfortunately, you just cannot install Windows 11 on this motherboard. Even if you try to hack past it, you just can't do it. And you can't also install later versions of Linux. You have to go for an older version. I did a bit of testing on this back in the past, and unfortunately, you have to go all the way back to something like Ubuntu 22 to even get something to install, and even then, it's a little bit flaky. So we are stuck with Windows 10. Another reason of why this system's really running out of steam now, because within a month's time, Windows 10 is going to be completely unsupported. So everybody's going to have to be forced to Windows 11, or you're going to have to use a unsecure system. When it comes to gaming, if you are somebody that wants to play your older titles on this system will now have absolutely no problems. Games like the original Space Marine will play absolutely beautiful on this system. You're going to get high FPS experience on that, particularly in 1080p, and you can crank those settings all the way up to high. But I'm not going to lie to you, if you want to play new games, particularly things that have like hardware ray tracing, and of course we do have that capability now with the RX 6500, you're still going to be lacking behind there quite a bit. If you look at games like Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, they will in fact start on this system now. You have to really run them in the lowest settings possible, even at 1080p. And the performance is going to be so dire, you're just not going to be able to get away with playing that game. It's going to be the same for other games that are similar to that. So, of course, if this system would have played that game, there would be no point in upgrading ever. And of course, this is quite old now. There's lots of hardware in between, so there's always a reason for those things. But hopefully, this system can now open up much more of the back catalogue so that you can have much more games at your disposal. The one game that we tested originally on this system that wouldn't run at all was, of course, Atomfall. Now, Atomfall is a AA game from 2025. I didn't have my high hopes for it with the original system anyway. And of course, it wouldn't even start because we were getting DirectX 12 issues. We just didn't have the technology to do it. But hopefully now we do. So this is the game that we're going to be testing today. See if we can get it started. It should start, and see if we can get a playable performance out of it. So let's kickstart the game and see what happens. Now, of course, Atomfall, when it first loads up, and again, it's going to take a few seconds to do this, even though we're running on an SSD here, it doesn't mean that we've completely changed the world with it. We do get this menu up first. That means we can go and configure the game up before we actually get in there. And I'm going to currently leave the game at a medium setting. We're not going to go for a high setting. I'm not sure if the system is still capable of that. I think that the CPU is going to be way too weak for it, even though this game isn't really that CPU intensive. I'm going to disable motion blur because I don't like it, and ambient occlusion because we don't need anything else holding us back, particularly if it doesn't really make a difference to me. And under the display, we're running in 1080p, and we're going to unlimit our frame rate. So we'll save those settings and we'll start the game and see what happens. So far, it has started. We haven't got any errors. Last time, it actually crashed out here, and I think it's thinking. You can see the little window spinning thing, so it's taking its time to actually get there, but I don't think it has. There you go. It's actually got through. We've got to the main menu. We're not going to get any kind of DirectX issues here. It's kind of chugging a little bit here, but hopefully it clears up a little bit. But yeah, the game starts. So we have definitely opened up a new catalog, but let's see what the performance is like. At the main menu, everything is running beautifully fine. This is kind of like a rendered scene as well, so it's going to be affecting our performance, and we're currently getting 124 frames per second in the menu. That's actually a good sign. We don't need to configure anything. We can just resume the game because we've already done that pre-hand. The target for this is going to be 60 FPS, 1080p, 60 FPS, just like we do with most other systems like this. It is definitely a 1080p maximum system. You're not going to get away with 1440p, even if the graphics card could do it, because like I say, the rest of the system is really going to be holding it back. But if we can get a 1080p 60 FPS experience, I think this is an absolute win for the old FX system. We've now jumped into the game. This is actually at the end of the game. I've kind of completed it before in the past, but I haven't really gone around and done everything. So we'll get a good indication. We're currently getting an average of 45 frames per second, although it is increasing as we go down this hill. It's now 49 frames per second with a 1% low of 33. The game is definitely playable at this configuration. Our CPU is being utilized much more than the graphics card, although it's not completely maxed out, so there's probably a little bit more to give, but unfortunately we can't get it out of this game. We are using around 57-55% of the graphics card. This is where it's actually being held back by that CPU, and it's using around 3.5 gigabytes of VRAM. VRAM on this graphics card will be the biggest limitation, only having 4 gigabytes, but again, the types of games that you're going to play on the system, it shouldn't make too much of a difference, and so far it's actually proving to be right. Now, our continuous frame rate is increasing up to nearly 60 FPS. We've just hit it there, but it's dipped back down again. So I think if we want to get actually a bit more of a smoother experience, we need to pop over to the options. We'll go to the display. It's currently running at a 90% render scale, so it's not fully in a medium setting. But I think what we will do is we will drop that down to an 80. Let's see if the 80% render scale can actually boost us over that 60 FPS. We'll save the settings and we'll jump back in, reset some stats there. So that's actually made a little bit of a difference. We're now getting an average of 60 frames per second with a 1% low of around 39/40. It keeps dipping up and down. But the game is running absolutely smooth here. We've got a very low frame time that's not really jumping too high. Maybe you probably shouldn't be playing this in a medium setting. I think once we get to some real kind of hardcore areas where there's a lot happening, maybe that will dip a little bit. But again, it's still running at around an average of 60 frames per second. It dips down to around 55 now and again on the continuous, but this is completely playable. This is absolutely amazing because this game is quite cheap to buy. And for anybody out there that really wanted to play it, you could actually get away with playing it on this system. There's absolutely no issue at all. So you can play a game from 2025 on an FX system that in total only cost us now £130. The original system was £30. The upgrades we made to it were £100. So a £130 gaming PC that's playing a 2025 game, okay, in a medium setting, but we are getting 60 frames per second on average. So that's an absolute win in my opinion. And that is not all. With the upgrade we've made, we've opened up a whole new catalogue of games just like these ones here. Now, for most of the modern games that you will be able to play on this system, you will have to run them in either a low or medium setting. There's just no way that you're going to actually push them into a high setting and get them playable, but at those settings, they are quite playable. Unfortunately, anything that is reasonably modern, that is a very CPU intensive game, something like Cyberpunk 2077, unfortunately the system's just not really going to give you a decent enough experience in that. The reason for that is, again, the CPU is just completely holding all of the games back, even with the RX 6500 XT. So unfortunately, that is not something that you're going to be able to do. And of course, you're not going to be able to play the latest and greatest games. But like I say, you can open up a whole new catalogue of games to play. So it can kind of keep you gaming for a little bit longer. I think we've done a pretty decent job on this system so far. We've shown how you can actually iterate upgrades on something and actually get more things playable. Unfortunately, I do believe that this platform is really coming to the end now, particularly without Windows support and the fact that we just simply cannot get any more performance out of that CPU. So to be able to play any other kind of modern games, we're going to have to upgrade our platforms. Let me know in the comments below what you think we should do to it next. We've only spent around £130 on it, and it's a good representation of somebody sticky plastering an upgrade on a system over time. So maybe we'll take it to the next level and give it a whole new platform. Again, let me know in the comments below what you think we should do to it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to see where we take it next, because I'll take your comments, we'll see what we want to do to it, and we'll put another video out to show you how far we can really take something like this. And I'm sure, as always, catch you guys in the next one.